The question to be asked is where's the gap, or where's the deficiency, or where's the thing where it's not equitable or equal even, right? Forget equitable. Is it even equal, right? Um, and then identifying those variables and then finding out what's causing those variables. So, why are there not more, like, removing being South Asian for a second and just focusing on being a religious minority? Why aren't more religious minorities entrepreneurs, right? So why aren't Jain Americans and Buddhist Americans and atheists and, um, you know, uh, Seventh-day Adventists, for example, why aren't there more entrepreneurs in that category of individuals in the United States? Why is it people that overwhelmingly buy in bulk, if you will, right? Most entrepreneurs come from a Judeo-Christian heritage in the United States, right? And so understanding where that stems from, what types of programs, support, and networks and collectives exist to support people trying to start their own entrepreneurial endeavors, what gaps are there for those individuals, right? And then finding ways in which we can either financially bring grants, bring access to capital through loans, or mentorship programs through people that already own their own businesses willing to help people in these underrepresented groups. You don't get to hold a diversity flag outside your office if you've never hired a brown or black person before. You're just lying. You're just lying. You're just putting a mannequin and saying you got people, but you don't have people. I mean, my business is in Grand Rapids, and we have 32 people now, and it's fully minority owned and operated. How hard was it to do that? Not a lot. People are lazy. They do the popular thing without, we can call it psychologically the work, but it's actual just work. If you're only recruiting in the 49506, then you'll get a certain type of candidate, right? If you're recruiting in 49507, you will get a different type of candidate. It's not hard. People just are lazy and don't want to put in effort and don't want to look bad publicly, so they virtue signal and put the sticker on their window.
Sure. I think that listening is a big key factor. Just listen. I think a lot of people hear to respond, or hear and want to add their own experience in a situation. And, maybe sometimes we think that we're helping somebody by saying, oh, I understand that, I went through this and this, but really, we're also unique, and we all have so many different backgrounds and so many different struggles that, even though I might identify with you in one way, it's not the same. And so I would say that the more that we are open to listening to others, the more that our biases get out of the way and our prejudices are, we're able to see them for who they are. I think discrimination happens out of ignorance, out of not trying to understand, out of not being tolerant, out of not being respectful or mindful of how maybe you perceive something maybe completely different than how somebody else perceives that. And I think that the work that we're doing, just like a project like this, I think the work that I know so many amazing leaders who have had their boots to the ground, and I've been so thankful to be a part of that in different spaces. Keep having the conversations, keep having those events that bring people together that can have those conversations. Keep, when good things happen in our community, unfortunately we've had the unfortunate shooting and killing of Pachavera as of late that really impacted our community. Show up for families who need, show up for each other, love one another, be in those spaces where we can say, listen, I'm hurting with you, I got your back, but we're going to uplift each other and get through this together. And we do face a lot of kickback, unfortunately, in this community, especially as we at PLC. When we try to be in those spaces, when we try to stand up for our own, but don't give up, but keep pushing through.
When I think of allies, is you seek to understand. You really want to know, not because it's something to check off a box, but or something to say, I am an ally, but actually really walk the talk. Does that make sense? So you really are doing the work to be able to be a true ally. Understand the education. If I were to ask an ally what intersectionality is, and if you have no clue, but you are an ally for women or ally for black, like there's certain things, like there's too much out there that I feel like people get lazy. They don't really want to go too deep, because when you go too deep, then it starts uncovering stuff and you start learning more about yourself. And I feel like it's so much easier for people to be so surface and not have to go too deep. Like, I can give you a little bit of money to support your organization, or I can go ahead and, I stood outside and held some signs up and I've done my work, and that's not scratching the surface. But being able to truly understand is educating on your own, not trying to always go to those individuals, because that's just enough in itself, right? Like, do your information, anything you want to know. You want to know how to bake a pie, and you never baked a pie, you will look that mess up. You might look for somebody who knows how to bake pies, but in these cases, it would make more sense is to actually do the education and looking up and reading books, and there's so much out there to get you educated, at least to know, so that you can have a reasonable conversation versus I just didn't know. Like, that means you haven't even got any deeper then. So I made a one on the tangent, but I feel like allies really need to understand, like, what are you an ally for, to be quite honest? Like, why? Why do you want to be an ally? Not because of what you saw on TV, but why exactly do you want to be an ally? You can't really answer that. You might want to start with the definition of ally first, and then start digging in, figuring out what you really are passionate about.
I think there is a difference between listening to just like listen, or listening to understand. I think we need to listen to understand, not to respond or reply. When you try to do that, I think you will hear a person as a whole, not a person who is a refugee, not a person who is an engineer, not a person who is a person of color, as a whole. And I think one person is more than just a son, just a father, just a brother. It's like we have to look as a holistic, right? And also being more informed, or like a traveling could be a great thing to do to understand the globe, understand the world, and understand the people, right? Also, like not being afraid to approach someone who might look different than you, just asking simple questions, and I think like that could eventually develop to something like bigger than just conversation in terms of relationship. So I think conversation, like bringing this kind of topic in different settings. It could be at work, it could be at family gatherings, it could be at church, it could be at temple, it could be at neighborhood association meetings. We cannot just have this conversation in a location or a couple of locations. Has to have in many different locations.
When we talk about change and what we want from our allies and what we want from our colleagues, it's such a complicated answer. I have this conversation a lot of times with people, and one of the things is, what does change look like? So change is not just getting more people of color in or unrepresented in medical education into our folds. It's numbers. Yes, we do need that. But then how do we do that? So we can do pathway programs and things like that. So that's one aspect. The other aspect we need to address is then when we get people in spaces, how do we change the culture? And I think that is a big, where we really need, we call them allies. I always say I like an ally, but I also need an accomplice, because they're going to help get some things done. I was at a conference a few years back, and I heard that's not original to me, but I need somebody to get some things done. I need people to open their eyes and be aware of things. I need people to understand some of the burdens that our marginalized and minoritized people bring. I need you to not see, well, I treat everybody as a human. I don't see color. Well, first of all, when you tell me that, I always say, well, how you get dressed in the morning? You know, there is a medical diagnosis of color blindness. And so I say, are you truly colorblind? And because what happens is you do see my color, and I want you to see my color. I want you to see my value. I want you to see my intersectionality and what I can bring. But I also think when we're in those spaces, certain people have a voice. I never forget, about 6 months ago, there was a gentleman, prominent physician, majority physician, came to me and he said, Lisa, can we meet? And he was sincere. This is a person I've known for about 10 or 15 years. And he says, I've had a change in my career. I'm going into the next phase. But he says, I know I'm in spaces that you're not in. How can I advocate? So it's that one-on-one connection. If you're in a space and you're making decisions, we need to ask the questions. Who's in the room? Who's not in the room? Why aren't they not in the room? Whose voice will we have? And then when they're not in the room, let's not just say, well, there's none of them around. Then if there's none of them, we don't have any, then why don't we have any? And then why haven't we heard their voices? Why can't they get into the room? And we need to continue to ask that question across all levels, whether it's disability, race, ethnicity, whatever it is, age. We need to continue, and we have to continue to have that. And we need to call ourselves on there always needs to be several people. And this is the other thing. We can't continue to rely on people of color to ask those questions. We need people, majoritized people, to use their privilege. And I always tell them, privilege is not a bad word. It's a bad word when you don't recognize your privilege and you don't use your privilege. I know that I have privilege. I have an education. I came from a family that valued education. That was a privilege. I have some gained privilege by my current employment status. I know that. So we have to use those privileges. So just like you have a privilege based on how you grew up and maybe just how you look, I need you to use the privilege, because you can get away with, let's be honest, you can get away with saying things that I can't say. Or if I say, there's eyes that go, oh, here we go. Why it has to be this conversation? So that's what we need to do. And we need to do that at the micro level. Maybe it's on your one-on-one space. We need to do that at the board level. We need to do that at the community level and the societal level. And that's what change looks like. The frustrating thing about that is change is slow. And sometimes it feels like we're going 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and then we're turning around in circles. But we still have to continue to do the work. And I think and when I have the conversation with my young people, I always have to say, change is slow. Things are better. They're not as good as they need to be by any means. But we have to kind of keep chipping away. And it's all of us working together collaboratively.